Good morning and welcome back to Money Growth Project. I want to talk about something today in this video that has been all over the place in the news recently, big in the world of obvious technology and blockchain and cryptocurrency. I mean, it kind of goes, a lot of this goes hand in hand, but that's with NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So this became pretty popular. Oh, I would say actually earlier this year when Logan Paul releases NFT, and because he's Logan Paul, he's got a huge following. It was becoming more and more popular in the news, and they've existed before Logan Paul did. I think he's just one of the ones who, got a lot of attention because of his audience size. But it talks about, because you hear the stories of how many people, people making millions of dollars with these things, and like this seems kind of, to a lot of people, seems pretty ludicrous. But this is an article, going against all the hype with NFTs and basically saying how, there's some pitfalls where you could essentially wind up buying one and end up broke or end up losing your money because of, the technology is still pretty new. So I want to go through this article here from TheVerge.com. I'll put it down in the description below. Guys, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up, please, and thank you as we talk about this. So this article is not too long. It does give a good foundation in the beginning, and then a lot of the meat of it is like as you get towards the middle. So it's a pretty good read. It talks about how your $1 million NFT can break tomorrow if you're not careful. So it talks about this $69 million NFT that Beeple sold, and that's referring to this right here, this image called Every Day is the First 5,000 Days, and it's sold for $69 million. And it just talks about, how it's just such a different concept when it comes to buying artwork or buying something like that when it comes to these NFTs. Now, it does say if you were to buy this, is the name of the artwork isn't there, the name of the artist is missing, and crucially, you won't even find the actual piece of art. So it's not a flaw in Beeple's NFT, it's just how the system works. Now, it does refer to NFT system being a house of cards. So basically saying that, this article doesn't feel that it's a very strong system. It's more, it has more danger than it appears, and that the system is built on trust. This is going to be a key element throughout this article. So NFTs are fundamentally built on trust. Trust that a seller won't screw you over. Trust that these tokens magically have value, and that holds true even at the deepest level on the system. So basically you're buying a collection of metadata defining what you own. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into how NFTs work a little bit on the back end. So this is an important section right here. It says, but there's one significant gap in the system ensuring that an NFT is held together. NFTs use links to direct you to somewhere else where the art and any details about it are being stored. And as anyone who has browsed the internet knows, links can and do die. So what happens if your NFT breaks down and points to nothing? This is a good quote by this professor. It says, that's an awfully expensive 404 air for buyers of these NFTs. So this gives a quick definition here that NFTs are what they call digital tokens used to buy and sell digital art. But unlike a painting, which can be placed in a buyer's home, an NFT is more like a piece of paper saying that you own something. So basically like a certificate or some certificate of authentication. So this is generally a digital illustration or video, and then sometimes is one about a cat that sold this image of a weird-looking cat. So this is part of it. This is important for understanding how this works. So the system usually relies on the Ethereum blockchain, which ensures a few things. So it keeps the record of everyone who has owned the NFT. So it'll show who owns it now and who has owned it in the past. And it keeps the NFT from ever changing. So that means someone who buys NFT and then resells it can't misrepresent what they own. So that's part of the authentication portion. So it says all there in the NFT just how it was when they bought it. You can think of it like the papers that authenticate a thoroughbred. They're not the horse, but they certify the provenance and history of one. So this talks about how very little data is actually even stored in the NFT though. The NFT includes information on where you can find a description of the artist's name, the title of the work, but the information is not typically on the blockchain itself. So NFTs include information on where you can, again, find the artwork they represent, but the actual artwork is still a link away. Now, this is the part where it talks about links and you get into traditional URLs and hosting and all that kind of stuff, and where things can go wrong with NFTs. So as traditional URLs pose a real problem for NFTs, the owner of the domain could redirect the URL to point to something else, leaving you getting rickrolled. Or the owner of the domain could just forget to pay their hosting bill, and the whole thing disappears. So the animation that Grimes sold for almost $400,000 is primarily sourced to a pair of traditional URLs, which could break down if either of the two different companies went under. So it says, as the buyer, this is something you'd have no control over. So that's part of the thing when it comes to the hosting, is you have no control over this aspect of it. So unless you've got enough money to buy the entire domain and keep it online and pay for the hosting yourself. So this is one way to solve that problem, or NFTs try to solve that problem. It says there is a system called IPFS, or Interplanetary File System. Now the second half of this paragraph will break it down a little more for you. It says rather than identifying a specific file at a specific domain, IPFS addresses let you find a piece of content so long as someone somewhere on the IPFS network is hosting it. So really what it does is this means that a multitude of hosts rather than a single domain owner could be ensuring these files remain online. So it's not just if there's one domain owner and like I said, they don't pay for their hosting or whatever it is, and like your link is gone, it's now useless. It's basically saying they're trying to spread out the risk by the fact that a multitude of hosts are ensuring these files remain online. So the system also gives buyers control. That's part of the point, is to give buyers control to help them secure the NFT that they've bought. So they can pay to keep their NFT files online. They still have to remember to pay the hosting bill, but they can host it anywhere in the network. And even this system still has flaws with it. So if you check, the team behind Check My NFT has been looking inside the NFTs to see if their IPFS addresses actually work. And in several cases, they found files just won't load. So even with this, there's still, there can still be risk involved with buying an NFT, and again, potentially just losing your money on the whole thing. So it found that, some artworks were temporarily missing from major artists like, Grimes, Deadmau5, Steve Aoki. And the files did come back online eventually, but only after the team called attention to their absence. Because the files have to be actively available on the network for the system to work. And unlike with a domain owner, no host has a singular responsibility to do that for files on IPFS. So this is an important sentence right here. There's one hard drive crashing could lead to permanent loss of the assets. The Check My NFT team warned in a message to The Verge. So again, it's kind of, you could wind up losing everything. You could wind up losing big. That does talk about how NFTs do need to be maintained. If a buyer purchases an NFT that relies on the IPFS, ultimately be on them to ensure the file continues to be hosted and available in the system. They rely on a traditional URL, and buyers could be, or if it relies on a traditional URL, and buyers would be in a more precarious position, having to hope that whatever third party currently hosts the file off on the auction site stays online. So again, it's saying you're still vulnerable when it comes to buying this. Even with some of the systems they've tried to put in place, there's still that vulnerability of losing. So, and it does talk here, it says, now there's a real chance that years from now, NFT will point to a missing file. If that's the case, how do you prove that it is, prove what it is that you actually own? Because you're still at this stage of evolution of blockchain where you need to have a traditional written contract that tells you what you are getting, and that's enforceable against the seller of that asset. So then here just pretty much closes out saying that, despite the buzz around Ethereum smart contracts, which is another topic for another day, is NFTs typically do not include the literal contract. A buyer agrees with the seller of a work detailing what they're getting and how they can use it. Those rights are typically just built into an auction site's terms of service. In many cases, NFTs offer very little beyond a bare claim of ownership of the NFT itself. So buyers could end up in one of two situations. In one case, they own the NFT with a broken link, but they and the rest of the world understand what artwork is used to represent. And they're saying extremely expensive collage. That was not that one. That was this one earlier, this collage that sold for $69 million. So long as the image exists somewhere in the world, it's possible the NFT could retain value as long as the artist, owner, and prospective buyers all agree on what the token is meant to represent. It is, after all, a system built on trust. The other scenario is the image has gone missing and no one can tell what artwork the NFT was originally tied to. Bad scenario to be in. If that's the case, it's hard to imagine the NFT would have had much value anyway. You can't sell a painting that's been burned or a statue that's been lost. Good point. An NFT with missing art is just that, nothing to look at. So NFTs are real big right now. It's becoming way more mainstream. They're becoming very popular. There's a lot of hype around it. There are a lot of people who think it's dumb and they don't understand, spending so much money on these things. But, there is risk involved with this because obviously when something especially is really new with this kind of technology and the masses of people haven't adopted it yet, there's something really in the early years, there is a chance you could wind up losing out on this. So that's what this article does. It brings a little bit of light to the idea that even with all this hype, there is risk when it comes to buying NFTs. And there are ways that you could wind up just losing the artwork you bought. You can wind up losing the money that you put into it. So tell me what you guys think about this down below. I appreciate you guys checking this out. Hit the like button if you haven't done so yet, and I will see you guys in another video.